A roll call?
Yes, Vice President Van Hook, let the record show that 4 out of our 5 board members are present.
Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Ms. Richards, do we have any upcoming events?
Thank you, Vice President Van Hook. As you can see, we have conscious discipline training here for our parents on Thursday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. Everyone's invited to attend. Also, on Tuesday, August 27th, we have our next board meeting right here in the district office. And next, on Thursday, August 29th, we will have Dangers of Snapchat Parent Night here in the district office boardroom. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to a public hearing to discuss the fiscal year 2025 adopted budget. Mr. Moore?
Vice President Van Hook, members of the board, tonight I'll be presenting on our budget revision number 1. A little background on why we are revising this early in the game. First, obviously this is the previous budgets that have been approved so far for 25. In June 5th, the board approved our proposed budget. On June 26th, the board approved that proposed budget and adopted it. Tonight, I'm presenting budget revision number 1. And then as we look into December, there'll be another opportunity to revise. The reason we are looking to revise this early in August is we are looking to correct a budget cell on page 2. This particular cell has implications on our IDA funding and several grant funding. Essentially, we under budgeted. The adopted budget included a budget of $102,000, and in reality, we needed $1.2 million for that particular cell. So that put us below what they call the maintenance of effort, that ADE test when we submit our budget up to ADE after the board approves it. And so below that maintenance of effort for SPED funding, they basically cut off our IDA grant funding, saying that we did not meet or exceed our special education funding. So the revision right here will correct that one cell and budget appropriately on what we intended to budget. Again, that was a typo and a mistake on page 2. In addition, while we were fixing this, we did adopt on the preliminary budget forms because our board meetings are in June. The legislative cycle was still ongoing and did not finalize until July. So we took the opportunity to update our budget forms and present this revision on the finalized budget forms, which have all the legislative appropriations that were approved in the legislative cycle for fiscal year 25. So what has changed? Again, not a lot. M&O is exactly the same as what you adopted. Again, the main change on the M&O was changing that one cell for SPED transportation. On the capital side, there was a slight change. This is because we utilize the final budget forms. So if you remember when we adopted, there was discussion around the capital funding and how the increases were going to be appropriated for fiscal '25. If you remember, the final decision was to appropriate the capital increases on a one-time basis and not an ongoing basis. And so I took the assumption when we adopted that they were going to be ongoing. And so the final forms, they reflect the one-time increase, but what that means is ADE has not given us those one-time numbers yet, so we have to basically take out this appropriation that I anticipated coming. What I envision is in December, when ADE gives us the final number, we'll be adding this $322,000 back in the budget. But the issue is the final forms don't have that number in it. So when we are revising to these final forms, I can't legally put that number in there until ADE gives us that number. So I have to take it out of the budget revision, and that equates to $322,000. But I completely anticipate bringing that back in once ADE gives us that final one-time appropriation. So that is the only budgetary change in this revision. Is there any questions on those two cells before I get to my last?
Mr. Moore, I do have a question. So if we made the mistake of the 1.1 million, you said in cell G19, and then, which is the IEP pupil transportation cost with program 400, correct?
Yeah, that's directly related to sped transportation costs.
Okay, so how come when we're doing that, it doesn't make an impact to the total budget of the 6 million?
Yeah, so it doesn't change our total budget implication. It just indicates how we budgeted, where we budgeted our funds. And so that budget number is just, it's not derived to the formula at all. It's just saying we intend to spend 1.2 million on this area. It has no delineation on the funding formula or the budget formula. It's just one of those cells that's built into the outdated, I would say, budget forms that we have to indicate how much money we intend to budget for out of the total M&O budget. It's not saying you can increase your budget, it's just saying how much do you intend to spend or to budget for sped transportation. It has no relationship to the overall budget formula in its entirety.
So we're not taking it from somewhere else and applying it to transportation, and that's why it's not changing the total number?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I took the opportunity to also fill in the board and the public on kind of the '25 budget calendar going forward. Again, bringing this budget forth tonight fixes that correction on page 2, which then puts us in compliance with the maintenance of effort requirements from the Arizona Department of Education. In December, at that point in time, AD issues a letter, and if we are over budgeted by 1% or more, they will ask us to revise our budget. We have to wait until December, but that's at that point in time, AD has reconciled our ADM to what we adopted, and at that point, we get to kind of true up or reconcile the adopted budget, or tonight, the revised budget, to where our ADM numbers are reflected in December. January through March, that is our timeline where we review our FY26 budget estimates. And then on May 13th, we do our final revision. That could be either budget revision number 2 or budget revision number 3, depending if we need to revise in December. And again, that one revises to the final day, the average 100-day ADM. And that day is January 10th, but again, that 100th day is the average of from the start of school to the January 10th day, the average ADM for those 100 days. That is what we're finally funded on and what we revised to in May. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I don't have any further questions, but if any member of the public has any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to speak at this time. Nope, no questions. All right. We're moving on to the consent agenda. I motion to approve the consent, oops. Oh, yes, sorry. At this time, we reconvene into open session. And now, we're moving on to the consent agenda. I motion to approve the consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.10.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-0. At this time, we'll take a short break while the board moves for the work study. We'll turn this time to Ms. Richards for the AI presentation.
Thank you, Vice President Van Hook. Members of the board and community, we're excited this evening. We have been working on this for over a year. So I think you're going to find it informative and fun. And we don't have fun in these meetings, but tonight we're going to. So about a year ago, for me, I went to the Trust Model Policy Update Program in August. And that's where I went into a session with an individual named Matt Discoli. And I was like, wow, this guy is ahead of us. And I like that when other districts or other places get ahead of us. But AI is a real thing, and it's out there, as we all know. So I spoke with Matt, and I convinced him to work with us a little bit. He works closely with Mesa Public Schools, so he did a couple of meetings with us, and then he came and did a presentation for leadership, and that happened in December. So since that time, we've all been working together to learn and grow and gain knowledge. So I would be amiss if I don't highlight the two experts in the room. Their names are Janie Ramirez and Valerie Thomas. They are your instructional technology coaches. So they have been very, very interested and sometimes a little pushy about how slow can we go? You need to hurry up. But yeah, I called you pushy in a good way. So they've attended and we've attended several professional development sessions. Probably one of the most interesting one was hosted at ASU. And they had kids talking and presenting and convincing us that we need to learn how to use it, but use it right. And so that was part of our journey. You have several handouts in front of you. Our main mission initially was, how do we implement the use with guardrails and a vision so that we support teachers, but we also give them parameters and guidelines. So you'll see a document that says getting started with generative AI. And this is the guide for the Higley Unified School District. And so Valerie and Janie, if you're on our AI team, raise your hand. And this is our team. And Armstrong, you're part of the team now. You're just late. Jeff Bickle is part of this team as well. So you have a lot of people working to understand and do things correctly. So this guide is kind of our vision and our guardrails, let's call it that. So we know, where we're going and how we're gonna get there safely. And these guys are gonna present in a minute, so I don't wanna keep talking about all of this, but you also have a generative artificial intelligence K-12 education guidance document. This has been very instrumental. All the top experts in the state have worked to develop this, including ADE, NAU, and a bunch of school districts. So you'll see a lot of references here. I'm wanting all of us to go to an AI summit on the 23rd of September in Agua Fria School District, High School District. They seem to have done a really good job, and they're working really hard on responsible and ethical implementation. So building a strong foundation, gaining momentum, and then continuous improvement. One thing that's in this report, it's the Future of Jobs Reports of 2024 by the World Economic Forum. It forecasts by 2027, 75% of surveyed companies plan to implement AI. So we need to learn about it, we need to be responsible with it, but I don't think our kids eventually can function if they don't have that knowledge. So that's part of our journey. In addition, there's a 3-in-3 challenge document, which we want to accept as we are putting these steps in place. There are a lot of districts across the state of Arizona that have accepted the challenge, and I think you're going to be happy with what you learned this evening from our experts. So I'm going to turn it over, probably to Janie first, right?
Right. Thank you. So before we get started, we're going to give you access to the AI literacy presentation. So in your search bar down at the bottom of your screen, if you type the word camera, you'll find your camera app. And once you find your camera app, it will open, and it opens directly to the camera, but on the right-hand side, below your camera app, there's a little QR code, so you'll just need to switch to that. If you have any issues finding it, Valerie's here to help. We also have quite a few of the tech team here that can help. And once you find that QR code, you have a QR code in front of you. If you hold this up to your QR code reader, a link will open up on the bottom of your screen, and if you click that link, it will give you access to the presentation for today. So if you have any trouble getting in, please just let us know. You're fine.
Okay, everybody over here is good.
I think Amanda might need a. Okay. Is there anyone who's not able to get in that still needs a minute? Okay, I think most people are in. So this gives you access to the entire presentation that we'll go over today, but the reason we wanted you to open it is so that you'll have access to some links for an activity we'll do here in a minute. But to set our purpose for tonight, this AI literacy training for teachers provides the basic knowledge of Gen AI, as well as information about the AI implementation in Higley.
So before we get started, we're going to have a little fun. This is the fun part. We're going to do a little activity, and because we're a Microsoft district, for this activity, we're going to use Microsoft Copilot. It's called a large language model, and it's sometimes referred to as an LLM. And a large language model can understand and generate human language. It works by being trained on vast amounts of text data from books and websites and other resources out there. This helps it learn patterns and structures in language. So when you ask it a question or give it a prompt, what it will do is it uses what it's learned to generate like a relevant response that a human would give you, or what you or I would give someone. So what we're going to do first, we are going to click on your screen, go to copilot.microsoft.com, so just click on that link, and then you're going to sign into Microsoft Copilot using your HUSD login credentials.
Yep.
All right, so step 3, let me explain a little bit about what we're doing here on step 3 first before you get started. So step 3 is a template, and this is a template that I created. And so you are going to use this prompt template to create your own Pixar-style yearbook photo of yourself. So the template, you're going to copy and paste it into the Microsoft Copilot. And so once you copy and paste it into Copilot, you're going to change all the words that are in capital letters to fit your characteristics. Because currently, it's reading to describe me. And so we want it to describe you. Does that make sense? You're going to copy and paste prompt 3 into Copilot. We'll have people come around and help. So once you've created your character, feel free to share with each other what your new characters look like. I hope you enjoyed that. This was just a nice little warm-up, just to introduce you to Copilot and to get us thinking about generative AI. Do not close out that tab because we're going to come back to Copilot here in a little bit.
All right, so it's important for everyone to be literate in the basics of AI. So this statement from Digital Promise describes AI literacy. So please take just a moment to read it. And all of these pieces here in this statement will be addressed at some point in today's presentation. So why? Why is AI literacy important? Because it's our responsibility as educators to help prepare students for future success. So what does that mean for Higley?
Everything that we are doing with AI ties back to our mission, vision, and core values, as well as the components of HUSD, Portrait of a Graduate. such as being a responsible citizen, an innovative learner, and a college and career ready. We need to expose students to AI so they are better prepared, because universities like ASU are embracing it and they're partnering up with AI. And for students who go the career route, there will be fields that they go into that will require the use of AI, such as digital marketing, social media managers, IT support technicians. So this AI literacy presentation focuses on key indicators 1.1, 1.3, that's under the teaching and learning student success, and 2.2 under highly effective personnel.
So the first topic we're going to talk about is demystifying AI for educators. So the term AI is used very broadly, but there are different types of artificial intelligence. So the three types are stage 1, machine learning, stage 2, machine intelligence, and stage 3, machine consciousness. The world is currently just over in stage 1 at machine learning. And what machine learning is, it's the ability for computers to learn from experience or data without human programming. So this graphic shows how AI technology builds from each subcategory. And one subset of AI is generative AI. So if you look at the very bottom, generative AI it generates new text, audio, images, video, or code, and it's based on content that it's been pre-trained on. And pre-training is a technique in machine learning where a model's trained on a large data set to learn general features and representations. So for example, if we show an AI various pictures of dogs and they're all labeled dog, as well as other animals that are not dogs, once AI has seen many pictures of dogs, it can identify any dog, even if it doesn't look exactly like the specific picture. The more pictures it sees, the more efficient it is. So AI is everywhere, and it's not anything new. So on the screen are some examples of AI in everyday life. So some examples might be streaming apps like Netflix. So when you log into Netflix, it might suggest certain movies for you based on your streaming history. Or navigation and travel, you might use Google Maps to get to a location. Or smartwatches. Lots of us probably have those on today.
We know educators have a lot of valid concerns regarding AI. There are student safety issues like data privacy and misuse. Just with all online tools, we need proper safeguards in place to help protect the students and their data. There's cheating, but on the other side, AI has the potential to enhance student learning when used with clear guidelines in place. There's also content issues like misinformation, but with strong safeguards and an emphasis on critical thinking, students can learn to evaluate the AI's responses.
So this is a graphic from the Arizona guidance document that you have. And as with any online tool, students need to be taught how to use Gen AI responsibly. So on the left-hand side, education without AI is like riding a mountain bike. The human's in control, but has no assistance. Too much reliance on AI, the center picture, too much reliance is like riding a motorcycle. You could go fast, but it's unpredictable and could be dangerous. So our goal would be the image on the right, using AI as a learning partner. So using it as a learning partner is like riding an e-bike. The human's in control, but the e-bike can reduce the struggle and result in more productive learning. So AI is similar to the calculator and the internet. It's a game-changing tool that will transform education, whether we're ready for it or not.
Our second topic is transforming learning with AI. There are 3 guiding principles. The first one is AI is ubiquitous. AI is everywhere. 169 plus countries have access to AI.
And the second guiding principle is that AI is undetectable. So there are AI detection tools, but they're not effective because they give too many false positives. So because of this, students may turn in an assignment and be accused of cheating, even if the work they turned in was completed without the assistance of AI. And higher education institutions have chosen not to use those detectors.
The third guiding principle is that AI is transformative. It's going to transform how we live, work, how we teach and learn. In terms of redefining academic integrity, I'm going to read this quote from Arizona's official generative AI document, which you have in front of you. Within the educational implementation of generative AI lies a transformative opportunity to reconsider the methods we use to teach and assess student learning. AI can help us rethink what we ask students to do and why. Now let's hear the thoughts of a 25-year veteran writing teacher.
Spirit Week, jammies, get over it. My brain is hurting because I thought today long and hard about all the new tools coming out, all the new sites like ChatGPT. There's a new one called Simplified that I hadn't learned of until today. I don't know that we as a human race need to necessarily still know how to write essays very well. Just like we stopped needing to know how to do long division all by ourselves ad nauseum. We need to understand the elements of good writing. We need to understand what it looks like and how it works, but I don't know that we all need to be able to do it really well anymore. This coming from a 25-year veteran teacher of writing. Instead, I went back to square one. Why do I teach essays? I teach essays because I need students to have opinions that they can support with evidence and then make arguments. And I suddenly realized that I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe the future of essay writing is going to be reverse of what we do now. I believe that what we will probably see are essays given to students, and they have to dissect those essays, specifically looking for thesis, identifying the evidence, looking for how well the argument supports that evidence and that opinion. It's a whole new world we're in, my friends. And we can drag our feet on this and pretend this isn't happening and try to insist that everybody still knows how to write their 5-paragraph thesis-based essay, but I think it might be the end of a time period that we've come to, folks. Adapt or die. Actually, in this case, adapt or spend the rest of your life being the AI police. Not my plan. Thank you all for doing the good work.
In other words, generative AI offers an opportunity for rethinking how we teach and learn.
So here are some ways educators may use generative AI, and there are a lot of opportunities for AI in education. So for example, a teacher might use Microsoft Copilot, which is what you used at the beginning of the presentation, to get ideas for how to make a lesson that they're using more engaging. And there are also future opportunities for AI in education for our students. So for example, a student might use Microsoft Copilot to get a tutorial for steps on how to solve a math problem. Many opportunities for student use of generative AI, but we are not promoting the use of AI with students yet. All right, and while there are plenty of opportunities with AI, there are also risks to consider and mitigate. So our third topic is ensuring a responsible approach to AI. So on the screen, here are 5 things that we need to consider when using generative AI: bias, misinformation, intellectual property, data privacy, and equitable access. But I want to focus primarily on data privacy to emphasize that personally identifiable information should never be fed to an AI. And AI is like any other tool. Guidelines and policies surrounding student information must be adhered to when using AI.
Janie, can I ask Ms. Davis to elaborate on something because we don't want to miscommunicate? She knows what I'm looking at her to say, I think.
I just want to go back to the video of the 25-year veteran teacher that we watched. That is not to say we're saying throw out writing, throw out explicitly teaching writing. We are saying that we can use AI as a tool to enhance writing instruction. So instead of going and finding exemplar pieces of writing to use when modeling writing, we can go to AI and use that as the tool. We can go and find or utilize AI to pull the essay and then say, let's find a good thesis and use that instead of having to always have our students write that when we're trying to get them to identify what makes a good thesis. So we're not saying stop writing, stop teaching writing, never, no. We still have to explicitly teach writing. But when the point is for students to be able to identify what makes something good in writing, we can go to AI for that support. So when AI can be a good tool, that's when we want to use it. It's never to stop explicitly teach something. So once students have a handle on that, like long division, we can turn it over to the technology to help out with that, to reduce that burden on students. Because I know I frequently don't do long division by hand. I'm going to go to a calculator for that. So if I can go to AI to help me reduce a burden of writing an essay, I'm going to do that. So how can we help students get to that step? We're not saying stop writing or teaching essays.
So now that we all have a basic understanding of AI literacy, let's try a prompt together. Let's go back to Microsoft Copilot, so in your other tab on your computer. I want you to type in the prompt, and it's this prompt: create a list of famous people I should know, and then share your results with your neighbor. Okay, can you share what you noticed about your response? Anyone?
I'm sorry, just like one person from the list, or do you want the whole?
Anything you noticed about the response that it gave you?
I don't know if I'm supposed to like recognize a connection or,
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe compare your list to
We were
Christina's.
just talking about our difference.
And what did you notice between the two lists?
I don't know, she got Cleopatra, I got Marilyn Monroe, so I don't know.
J.K. Rowling.
And I got Bill Gates.
Why do you think we got different responses?
I don't know, based on how we look. It's gotta be, it's gotta be compared to like the previous photo. Because it generates based on the information that it has about you. And the only information that it has is our description of ourselves.
Yeah, your response is only as good as the information that you gave it. So this particular prompt, that create a list of famous people I should know, it's very broad, it's open. So you two are going to get two different answers. Whereas in the beginning, when I gave you that very detailed prompt for you to go ahead and change your characteristics, it was really, really detailed, and it gave you a pretty good little Pixar character of yourself. So again, it's only as good as the information that you give it. We call it kind of there's a saying for it, and it's called garbage in, garbage out.
All right, so what's next? Where are we with the implementation of AI in Higley? So some sites have had the AI literacy training, the rest have all been scheduled. Teachers can use AI for things like planning for instruction, student engagement ideas. However, we are not promoting the use of AI with students yet. We're setting our teachers up for success, which will then set our students up for success. It's just the beginning, and teachers will receive ongoing trainings in the future on AI resources and tools to use in their classrooms.
Janie, did you explain how you might have co-pilot operates in terms of what we put in there? If we close out of it, what happens?
Yeah, so the reason we had you log in with your HUSD credentials is because Copilot is closed for us in Higley. So there should be a little green symbol up in the, I think it's the right-hand corner, that's a little shield. And what that means is once you type information in there and you exit out of it, when you come back, your responses are not saved, unlike using Copilot if you were at home and just, Googling Copilot. So it's a little bit of a safer model that we have here in Higley.
Questions?
Vice President Van Hook, I do have a question, actually. I'm curious since it is on our closed system, if I put stuff in here, do we have, much in the same way if I try to go to certain websites, I'm limited to what I can do? Is those same limitations in terms of what search results we have? I guess I'm thinking about it from a student standpoint in the future.
Good evening. Copilot is not filtered the way that we filter our websites. Lightspeed, our filtering software, we're investigating whether or not in the future it will do that, but at this point in time, it does not. Microsoft does have safeguards in place. We, for example, as a test, asked if it would show us how to make fireworks. It will not. So there are safety structures built within the model that prevent certain types of results, and Microsoft continues to refine those. But at this point in time, it is not filtered in the same way as a web search is filtered.
And does it have the capability of knowing this is for, I don't know what grades we're planning on using this for, if it's just for high school or middle school, but do we have the ability to put in there that it's for these grades, these age groups, so that it doesn't allow kids to be able to pull up like inappropriate content?
As of right now, we're not recommending the use of Copilot with students, so it's just being used by our adult employees. So that's where we're at right now. I don't have anything beyond that.
Thank you. And thank you for explaining about the TikTok video, because that was literally like, I was like, what? We need to, obviously, kids need to learn how to write. So that is a concern. And then obviously data sharing is a concern of mine too. So it's nice to know that there will be safeguards in place so that student data isn't shared. And I think AI is great. It's the endless possibilities in education. But my fear is the bias, the information that, inaccurate information that it gives. Also, the potential of not allowing the critical thinking skills for kids is concerning as well. I don't want kids to heavily depend on it. And if they're using it, obviously here, they're limited as to how much they can do, but they can go in at home and use ChatGPT. And so obviously the importance of using it in a proper fashion, learning that is crucial to all of this, and to know that don't depend heavily on this tool, because it will impact their thinking ability as they grow up. So those are my 3 biggest concerns with AI. Thank you.
Go ahead. Vice President Van Hook. Thank you for kind of walking through this and the different aspects. And I like how we're thinking from an educator standpoint. I know we're not going to quit teaching writing, but what a concept of the teacher saying, why are we asking them to write an essay? What are we expecting them to get out of it? And looking at that from a reverse engineering standpoint, going, well, I want them to be able to cite evidence of something. And so obviously it's much easier, not necessarily totally accurate all the time, that if they go home and write an essay, because of these resources, are they learning what we're asking them to? That if we're kind of going backwards and providing them, here's the written essay now, I want you to find the supporting evidence. Is it appropriate? Is it really evidence? And so, and I know that was just one teacher's TikTok, an example, but it does make you start to think of, we talk a lot about intentional teaching and intentional learning, and again, the good point of long division, we all learned it, we all had to do it over and over and over again. And I'm with you, I never write out long division. You used to be lucky if you had a calculator, and now everyone has one all the time with them because everyone has some type of phone or electronic device. So the thought of this is out there, it's at their disposal, we can't control it, so how do we make sure that they're still getting the intentional piece of what we're trying to teach, and how do we use that to teach and to, I don't want to say to our advantage, but to our advantage for them to learn a skill. So I like the process that you guys are going through and thinking of the teachers, and not just, I know when what was it, GPT? I don't do it, but when it came out, like everyone was freaking out, going, okay, these kids aren't going to do anything. They're just going to go home and they're going to use this and turn in these essays and turn in this paper and this report and everything. And so everyone kind of was really afraid, I think, from the educational standpoint of, well, how are we going to teach these kids when they have this resource? So learning and thinking how to utilize this resource, both from an educator and then from the student standpoint. I appreciate you taking your time and learning about it and how we can help our teachers utilize what's there to ensure our students are learning what they need to.
Anybody else?
Thank you. I use AI every day, and it makes my life a lot easier. I can get a lot more work done. You said we're just using it for adults right now. Is there a timeline for students to eventually use this?
So right now, we are looking at it. First, we want all the teachers to have the same information. So we want to make sure that they all get the same AI literacy piece and that they get the proper training and the proper tools. And then we need to look at our policies and the back end agreements and things like that for data privacy and making sure that students are the right age to be able to use things. And then from there, we'll talk about which tools that might be appropriate to start using with students, but there's not a hard timeline yet. we want teachers just practicing with things first to get comfortable with it, and then eventually we'll make a decision on that.
Do you know if there's any programs beyond Copilot? I mean, there's lots of AI programs right now that is geared towards kids that might have those safeguards or something that's out there?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds out there, and there's a lot of things that are embedded within things that they're already using. But yeah, there's quite a few. There's, for example, there's Magic School. Some school districts are adopting that for student use.
A lot of those are paid
Yeah.
versions, and so some people are doing pilots. They're pretty expensive, but everything's new right now, so we're hoping at some point, you know, it kind of balances out, and maybe it's an add-on that we could get or something like that, but.
And it's always nice to see what the other districts are doing, so they can, like, you know, get all of those little bumps out of the way, and then we can look at and see, you know, how well it worked there and before we try it here.
Copilot is included as part of our Microsoft suite, so we don't pay anything extra for it.
So that's one reason why we want to go to that summit at Agua Fria, because so many districts are there and we will learn from each other. And we are going really slow on purpose, but I want to applaud the team for all their work and intentionality on this. Very good job.
Vice President Van Hook, I wish to echo the same thing in that this was very informative. Starting today, I'm resistant to AI, I think, for rational reasons as a teacher, right? In that you want to focus on the skills. And I think the most important thing is to take a step back and ask what's the intention, right? And so I'm very appreciative of the information that you shared because I feel like it opened a box in my brain that I was resistant to in general. The way I think about it specifically is I remember when computers started being in classrooms, which is the start of my teaching experience, and the complaints of, well, kids won't know how to handwrite and how important that is. And it's just not proven to be the case, right? It's because ultimately they're still acquiring language, they're still learning how to do that. And as far as our older generations being upset with how they're writing, that's just a normal cycle of events. So I'm greatly appreciative of giving teachers maybe an opportunity to start looking at things in a way that has always been difficult. Because, like, for example, I'm not an English teacher, and I still taught AP, and they still had to write a thesis statement, and I taught high school seniors, and the level of frustration of, like, sweet pea, that is not a thesis statement, is really hard. And so I think being able to have quick access to a lot of opportunity rather than relying on my mental energy to do so, especially being a singular individual. I feel like all of us in education can understand I can explain something 17 times and then one person comes in and you're like, oh my God, that was so much better. So I am very grateful. If it's at all possible, I don't know how others are feeling. I'm very interested in some of this information. So like maybe just seeing how these things are impacted or other ways that we can start doing that, mostly for my own edification. I recognize that these are a slow process. I just, you know, there are options that I didn't necessarily think about. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
I'd just like to jump in. I had the opportunity this summer to chaperone for the National Speech and Debate Tournament. And so I was in Des Moines, Iowa with 5 national competitors in public forum debate. And the National Speech and Debate Federation has basically said, use AI. And the kids were very clear, if you use AI, you won't win. AI is a starting point, but the nuance that they need and the detail and the ability to be able to speak about their subjects to a certain, to higher degree means that AI gives them the starting point, but they have to take it to the finish line. And so speaking to some of those concerns about critical thinking and that kind of thing, I saw it firsthand this summer that AI is a tool, and when kids are really invested in what they're doing, they're going to use that tool, but they're also they need to do more in order to be effective.
Sorry, that gives me one other thing actually I would like to, from my understanding, like in ChatGPT, because we don't have access to like academic journals, this is public ed, and that's expensive. I could type into ChatGPT to basically create and they create sources, right? They manufacture them, they write them in ways that make it look and appear as if this in fact was an actual academic journal, and it is not. So one of the things that I'm interested in maybe as we go through this, is there a way that we might be able to, as an education system, get access to more than maybe just Google results for some of these things? Because like in my head, I think one of the things that would be beneficial at a high school level is everybody having to take a course of being able to look at what makes a good study and what doesn't. So when we get information to find answers, how do you look at what was qualifying? And if we only have access to Google, we're very limited on what those can be. It doesn't mean there is a solution, but I feel like this is something, at least in the future, I definitely can see a benefit to, if we can, from an English perspective especially, be able to look at some of these things and decide our science, what makes a good study versus not. Just, if we could.
And to add to that, I'm in IT, so I can literally type into ChatGPT, asking it to tell me how to use our work system, and it will literally, it knows our system, so it will literally tell me how to do something. And so that's kind of what you're asking, is for it to have access to any online applications that we use and things like that to create any type of curriculum or supplementals.
I think that'd be beneficial from a teacher perspective. I was more looking at if I have to write a paper and we're looking at what makes a decent paper, right? And people will often cite sources. From a history perspective, we're limited because we look at who's the source coming from. It's a picture, it's a letter, et cetera. In science or other English ones, if you're doing a research paper, how do I know that this information that I have looked at is a study worth quoting and those types of things? That's more of a college level in general, but part of me is curious in how we can potentially include that, because if I'm an English teacher and I know they can get manufactured sources, that's really hard from a teacher perspective to how to know where these things are, and incorporating that as part of lessons seems beneficial, so that way students themselves, when they type into it, can look at it and be like, oh, this is crap, right? This one's made up, to kind of help set them up for success, I think, later, which goes to that critical thinking skills. It goes to how we can use some of these things. I just don't know if that exists. That's what you all are smarter than me for, kind of deal. I'm just curious because I think it could be very beneficial.
And that could potentially help with bias information that it spits out. Anybody else have any questions?
Vice President Van Hook, we had wanted to end this with my voice telling you all to go home and take a siesta, but we didn't get that far, because when Matt came, he did that, and everybody in the room was like, where is she? Because it was my voice through AI, and I never said it. So it was really, it's an eye-opener, right? There are a lot of things we have to learn and be cautious and aware of. So I want to applaud the team.
Yes, thank you so much.
Are you
All
good
right.
letting them go?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to move on to 6.2, policy update for IJNDB, technology resources in instruction. Ms. Richards?
Yes. Vice President Van Hook, tonight we are proposing changes to this policy, specifically to address the use of artificial intelligence. So when you look at our proposed changes, just specifically on page 2, you're going to see a large paragraph that emphasizes the proper use of AI, the fact that it should be guided by responsible and ethical considerations, and including mitigating bias, as you say, and we all agree, promoting transparency, and providing AI benefits to students. If it's used in the classroom, it should be approved by the site or district administrator and teachers' instructions and expectations. AI should also be guided and monitored by teachers and/or administrators and align with the district guidelines and policies. So as you'll see, the very last sentence speaks of AI systems should comply with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, and should support data privacy and security. So we're asking for these changes or additions to be approved this evening. Sorry, I'm just trying to jump ahead. Excuse me, I apologize. Everybody else is like, nope, first read, first read.
All right, and then on to 6.3. I'm sorry. Questions or comments about this policy? Nope. All right. Moving on to 6.3, an update on policy BBBA, board member qualifications.
Vice President Van Hook, tonight we are proposing adding that a convicted sex offender is ineligible for membership on a school district governing board. Policy verbiage is being added to add legislative updates. So you'll see that highlighted in blue. And this is a first read.
Thank you for that. I'm glad that we're adding this. It's crazy to think that, it could be a possibility the other way. So glad to see this is being added. Anybody have questions, comments?
I agree. I, too, was like, I assumed this was part of it, but here we are. But again, I think the argument probably is the reason it wasn't is because why would we vote for that? But, here we are.
I'm assuming it happened somewhere, so there was a law created to prevent that. All right. Now, moving on to 6.4, policy IKF, graduation requirements, first read.
Vice President Van Hook, if you'll take a look, we are updating the graduation requirement because by state law, we need to include a statement that you can see in blue on the second page that says including instruction on the Holocaust and other genocides for at least 3 class periods or the equivalent on or at least 2 separate occasions during any of grades 7 through 12. That needed to be added to the social studies part. So if you take a look at page 2 of it in blue, that's the verbiage that we are adding. Additionally, we added some clarification on the math courses, what they can consist of, and 3 credits of science as well. Those were clarifications from the ASBA policy. However, we needed to include the blue language specifically for the Holocaust and the genocides.
Any questions or comments? No? All right. All right.
Vice President,
do you want to go
I'm sorry,
over or?
really fast. With this policy, it doesn't change anything we're doing. We're already doing all of this, correct?
Correct. Yeah, okay. We just add that language to it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we are going to move to the action items. I motion that the governing board approve the budget revision number 1 for fiscal year 2025 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was 4. Motion passes with 4 ayes, 0 nays. (7.2) Ratify payroll and expense voucher 1122. I do have a comment regarding this. And I had met with Ms. Richards about hop, skip, drive, and just to discuss if we were using it. And I had shared my concerns about this company. I'm not sure if anybody saw, but there was 2 incidences with this organization, with this company in Scottsdale Unified, where a student was sexually assaulted by a driver, and then another student was physically assaulted by another child that was in the same vehicle. And so my question is, because we don't do the background checks, and we depend on the background check that the company is doing, how do we ensure that our students are safe, being with these drivers? And some of our kiddos obviously are vulnerable students in the care of a driver without an adult. And so that's scary for me. I want to make sure that we're also, I know when we discussed it that we didn't necessarily share with the parents that are using the services of the incident that happened in Scottsdale. And I mentioned that, we can't assume that people are watching the news and paying attention to the news to know this information. And I would assume that most parents think that if the district's providing that service, that it's a safe service. So I want to ensure that our parents are notified of any incidents that occur with companies like this so that they can make an informed decision of whether they want to have their child use that service or not. One of the questions I also had was that we're utilizing it for, I believe, it is for the out-of-boundary kids, correct? And is that the reason that the transportation cost increased, partially because of this company?
The budget modification in this particular vendor are not related.
Not related,
No.
okay.
The Hop, Skip, Drive provides contracted transportation for our McKinney-Vento students or our homeless students. Those students we are required by law to transport. And oftentimes with a driver shortage, those routes are not filled. And so we contract out with Hop, Skip, Drive. We also use another vendor, Everdriven. We have had no instances within our district. And unfortunately, Scottsdale did have that isolated instance with that driver. And so we do have a vendor registration form that all vendors who do work with us, they sign and indicate that they are vetting their individuals, and they do have background checks cleared with them. Ultimately, we have to rely on the vendor. We don't have the man hours to go and ask for that for every single one of our, but by them signing that agreement, we can then hold them liable if something does happen, that they agreed to that vendor registration form saying they would have background check. If something did happen, we then have the upper hand to hold them liable for that instance. I don't
And
know if that
do we
answers
know,
your-
like, the type of background check that they do? Like, the extent of the background check that's being done? Is it just basic $5 background check that they pay for online? Or, you know, it would be nice to know, like, to the type of background check that's performed on their drivers. Are the background checks performed before and after hire date? And how often are they background checked?
Board Member
and
Van
then-
Hook, can I
sorry.
ask you a question about the Scottsdale one real quick before you go on for that, in the case of that? Because it's pertinent to what you're talking about. Are you aware, one way or the other, if that individual had anything prior? Because part of me goes, I agree with you, we need to do background checks, and I also think asking how often do you do it, those kinds of things, fingerprint clearance card, all that genuinely matters. I'm also, if that person had not been convicted of anything, then that also, I think, matters with respect to, it doesn't change the situation in terms of it is horrific and not something that obviously anybody would want, but it does play into what we can and cannot do with respect to who we hire, who we use, et cetera.
Right, no, and I understand if you run a background check and they don't have any priors, nothing's going to show up, which is why I'm asking, like, how often are they doing background checks in case something changes after the hire date?
So Vice President Van Hook, we can definitely reach out to them and get specifics on this. I do know that the director of that organization reached out to Melissa Garland, who's our Director of Federal Programs and Compliance, and I know she shared that with you. But at the end of the day, this is helpful for information for us to get, and we will put it in status.
Thank you.
And just a clarification point, if they, because DPS has recently, I guess in the last year, changed their fingerprint process, assuming that they have to go through and get at least a Class 1 fingerprint clearance card because they're dealing with children, DPS has changed their process that now an employee is actually assigned to an employer. In the past, they weren't. And so we could have their fingerprint clearance number. We can check and make sure it's valid. But if we weren't attached to them, if something were to happen regarding their fingerprint clearance card, in some cases, it was almost impossible for them to notify the employer. Now, like I said, in the past year, maybe even less recent than that, now fingerprint clearance cards are attached to employers. So if something does happen during that time with their fingerprint card, it's much easier for employers to be notified now. So it doesn't, I get what you're saying, and I agree too. I mean, a background check is only as good until something has happened to show up on a background check. Right. But like I said, assuming they have a fingerprint clearance card because they're dealing with children, it's much easier now to be notified, and DPS has also started doing some different background checks as well. And that's even been more recent. So,
but what could, like, we don't have a contract with them, I think, is what was said in the Q&A. They're possibly an MOU, or I just want to know, like, contractually, like, what forces them to tell us what's on the background check of their employee? You know, are they obligated to share that information with us
yeah,
if
is
it's
there
a driver of
anything
one
in
of
an
our
agreement?
students?
And that's a good question, as well as were we notified of the situation with another driver? Do they notify the people that, the other districts that they work with?
I'm sorry.
No, that's,
Board Member Reese, yes, we were notified. And I can't remember when this happened, like Vice President Van Hook, do you remember the date that it happened?
I don't. I know it was last year sometime.
We can provide a summary of when it happened and how we were notified, and then answer all these other, get answers to those.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also know that they had a cyber attack and a major data breach, although I believe it said it was their driver information that was leaked and not necessarily the student information. But that's an issue as well. And I did look into the person that's in charge of like their security, and she used to run like a doggy daycare. So as far as experience with kids, I think this is like her first time working for, you know, for a company that's driving kids around. So that concerns me as well. And, you know, my ultimate issue is just to ensure that the company is obligated to notify us when they find information about their drivers, and then in return, we're notifying the families, or I think the situation in Scottsdale, I forget the, possibly like a homeless child, she was like a homeless child. And so, you know, there's got to be some sort of guardian or something, anyway, that they're notified. That's all. Anybody else? All right, and this was 7.2. I motion that the governing board ratify payroll and expense voucher 1122. All in favor? And I will abstain just because I'd like answers to those questions. All right, motion passes, 3 ayes and 1 abstention. On to 7.3, approval of license agreement between Higley Unified and SL Sororo Solar, LLC. I motion that the governing board, yes. I motion that the, unless somebody has questions, anybody have questions? Again, I motion that the governing board approve the license agreement between Higley Unified and SL Sororo Solar, LLC.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Did I hear 4? All right. Motion passes with 4 ayes. And now we are at 7.4, communication protocols. Bear with me here. On page 4 of the communication protocols, and I actually thought that the last time we talked, I thought that this was going to come back for another discussion, because when it first came out, we talked about changes occurring, and then we held off due to the superintendent situation. And so I actually expected that this come back as a discussion item versus an action item. So I would like to recommend some changes on here to be done. And so I would like to make a motion to table this to have further discussion and possible changes before we make a vote.
We can have that discussion at this time.
But can we make changes to it before we vote?
We can. So we can go through, you can make a recommendation for changes. If the board agrees, then we can vote on those changes. And when we make the motion, it's just either with or without those changes, with this change, without that change.
Okay. That's what we'll do then. So let's go with page 4, number 2. It says if board members plan to attend community meetings, the superintendent's office should be notified. I think that this needs to clarify that this is district-hosted meetings and events. Because for me, for instance, I've been involved in the community for many years, and things that I do within the community are not board business, board related. So that's not something that I need to, go through you. So I think that we need to just clarify that it should say district-hosted meetings and events.
I hear what you're saying, but the intent of this is if I'm going to attend a Town of Gilbert Council meeting, then to let the superintendent know, hey, I'm attending. Like if we've been invited to certain community things.
As board members, yes.
As board members. You do not need to notify the superintendent's office if you're, as an individual person, attending some meeting. If you're attending as a board member or on behalf of the district, then that's when we would need to notify them.
Right, that's why I want clarification.
So it's not necessarily district hosted, but we could use some phrasing there, because if I'm attending my community HOA meeting, I don't need to let Ms. Richards know I'm attending my community HOA meeting. So now if I'm attending my community HOA meeting because there's something being discussed regarding the school or on behalf of our district, they invited board members because they wanted to get to know us, something like that, then we should let them know, yes, I'm attending this. But those meetings are the ones that are coming through, that the invitations we're getting through the district.
Right.
So,
right, but that's why, it needs to specify that it's board-related,
attend community.
District-hosted.
Community meetings as board members.
If the invitation is.
Yeah, if the board members if they plan to attend a community meeting as a board member, the superintendent's office should be notified.
Community meeting.
As a board member.
And district-hosted meetings and events.
But not all those are district-hosted.
Right, but I'm saying and. In addition to.
We can. I think the expectation is if the district's hosting it, that we would be there, or we would let them know, obviously.
Okay.
But either way, I mean, like I said, if the district's hosting something, then board members are.
And I think I've shared last time that there was, like, you guys are wanting to make sure, like, open meeting laws aren't violated, that there's no more than 3 board members. But there is information that I think I've shared with Karen possibly that says more than 2 board members can be somewhere. And as long as board business is not discussed, that it's not an open meeting law violation. So
But we practice that when we attend events all the time.
district events, yes, not
And I mean,
community events.
I think like the Chamber of Commerce Awards, I believe, is one thing we've all been at.
Right, but like,
Histories
for
of
me,
Black-
like, I go to city council meetings. Like, I shouldn't have to disclose that I'm going to a city council meeting.
Not if you're not going as a board member, no. And typically, I mean, because bottom line, we're still community members, we can.
Right.
We can still go. So this is primarily when we're attending as board members. It has been the district's practice that if they know that there's going to be at least 3, to err on the side of caution, that we post it, just in case that anything were to come up. Because, like I said, we're all community members. We're all involved in different things. And if I see you somewhere, I'm going to come and talk to you, you know? And so if I see any of you guys, hey, how's it going? What's up? You know, and we just don't want it to be misconstrued. So any time that there's been a scheduled event that we're attending as board members, it has been our practice to try and post that just to err on the side of caution.
Got it.
I think to add to that, Board Member Reese, we also can't control how public respond to us when we're there. And so I think the benefit of doing that is, again, just doing everything we can to ensure that we stay compliant.
All right, so for that one,
Board Member Van Hook, I want to make sure we have the exact language that you guys want there. So Christine, did you grab it?
yeah, just after meeting. Yeah. Just add as a board member.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then there's number 6A, board meeting packets and supporting documentation prior to the meeting, usually at least 5 days prior. I just want to, I know we also discussed this, but that going forward, we are going to get the packages on Wednesday.
Vice President Van Hook, Ms. Richards, for cabinet, I know the reason we had talked about keeping it on Thursday before is to make sure that we can get some of the information that we are after in order to post. I recognize we now have meetings on Tuesday, so I guess my question is, are we in the same position that we were prior to moving the meetings to Tuesday, or because the meetings are on Tuesday now, some of those things have shifted? Because ultimately, I'm after a packet of information that we have rather than, you know, trickling in information kind of deal. So I'm just asking how that impacts where we are at.
So Board Member Wade, we are working really hard to get it all together, meet with the board president, go over the agenda, and our goal is if the following Tuesday, the governing board meeting is scheduled, to just send an email to you guys and let you know it's ready. I think you do know that Ms. Zimmerman puts information in there if she can. So We've missed the target a couple of times, but, you know, it's been Thursday morning, but we are working on it, and it's not a good excuse. It's just, we're going to keep trying, you know?
And if we are then, like, once you guys meet with Michelle and work on the agenda, then anything else that's added afterwards, for instance, the solar agreement, I don't think it's fair to add it to the consent agenda. I think it should be a separate item, especially the fact that it was just added yesterday, and all of a sudden it's part of consent, to allow us the ability to have a little more time to review it. And also, just for the purposes of transparency, if we can put those items as an action item, separate action item, instead of part of consent, I'd appreciate that.
If that's what the board wishes, we will. Do you understand what she's saying?
I do. I'm just trying to, I guess I'm trying to understand the point of making some of these changes. I think in terms of adding it as verbiage, so much as an informal practice, right? Because part of me goes,
Oh, I'm not
let's say-
asking to change verbiage. I'm just discussing that
Sure.
section.
What I'm trying to say is, I think that request, at least in my opinion, and the way I would view it, and obviously there are other people here on the board, is the situational, right? So we get our thing on Wednesday and something gets added on Friday. You guys send us an email the second that happens. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting that in consent agenda, considering it's a consent item. A lot of times the things that you update is either specific numbers or the dates or those types of things. And that still gives us time to request to pull it, should we do that, because that's already our practice as it is. If a singular board member asks it to be pulled, it gets pulled. So I guess I'm hesitant to say this needs to be done for everything. I think it is realistic to say, especially considering our meetings start on Tuesday, should we get a Monday change, send an email out of saying this is going here, does anybody want to pull it because it just got added today? I think that's realistic, and that follows with the policies that we currently have, because it may be something that you can go check in that email and go, oh, no, I don't care. Like, it's fine to be in consent agenda. Does that make sense? So I feel like if it depends on the time frame with which we are given in order to do that, seems realistic to me. I don't feel like every change needs to be something, because sometimes these are clerical errors that get updated or just normal business practices just to put it in something else, for me personally.
For me personally, I would like, for the sake of transparency, to be able to have a lot of these things in consent get approved with one vote and they're done. This specific situation was added after our deadline to be able to ask questions and get answers. And so that removes our ability to be able to question something that's been now placed on consent. So when something is added so late, then we don't have the ability to ask questions on an item, and we have to approve it without being able to get our questions answered. So that is the reason why I'm asking that if it's something that is past the deadline for us to be able to get our questions submitted and answers back to us, then that item should not go into consent. It should go into an action item on its own, so that we have this ability to be able to ask questions about it.
Vice President Van Hook, so it sounds like we're in agreement then that if our questions are due by Sunday, end of day, that would be any changes we add on Monday, would that not? I mean, we're not getting any email notifications on Saturday and Sunday as it is that they have changed these things. So if it's not on Thursday by end of business day, not on Friday by end of business day, I think it is realistic to say that Monday it gets put to an action item. I'm specifically saying the Monday, I agree with you that that seems a realistic desire. A change for Thursday or Friday feels less realistic to me, because you still have time to ask your questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm talking about adding something after our deadline to be able to ask questions. So that would be Monday. which is this situation. This agreement was added yesterday, and I asked that it be moved to consent.
Can I clarify that, though? The agreement was added Friday morning for Sundial.
Okay, so, and that's another thing. Like, if I'm done reviewing the agenda, I assume everything's there, and I don't have to go back because I assume nothing's being added. So it wasn't until Monday that we were told that there was changes made, and then
So I think for just general practice, if anything gets, once you email us that our agenda's out there, if anything gets added, then
I can email sooner. I usually call it out on the questions and answers, but I can just email you sooner. So once I send you on Wednesday, hey, it's ready to review, if I change something, I'll just email you right
just
away.
email us that something's been
And
added.
I won't hold it till questions and answers. I think that might
would be
solve the
great.
problem.
Yeah, because that's exactly what happened,
Okay.
is I was done with all my stuff, and then I didn't know changes happened until yesterday.
Well, I'll call them out sooner
And
to you guys.
I guess my question then on where it goes, I'm trying to understand why that matters. From even using this as an example, it was pulled and put as an action item. We didn't have any questions and didn't talk
Because then
about it.
I had time to review it last night.
Right,
And if I did have questions, I would have asked today.
sure. But then at that point, if you haven't gotten, just the same on anything in consent, if you haven't gotten the information you need, pulling it from.
I have to make a motion.
Well, pulling it from consent, if you don't feel we have enough time, whether it's in consent or an action item, if you don't have enough time to review it, you don't have enough time to review it, no matter where it's at on the agenda. So if you feel you haven't had enough time to review it, then that needs to be a whole different conversation on if it should be there, or that you could make a motion that it come off and be tabled to the next one.
Right, but it still requires a motion.
It does.
And potentially, I don't get a second, and now I can't move something out of consent, and I can't talk about it.
Well,
So,
and that's the other thing is that
By
just
moving
because
it to an
something's in
action.
consent doesn't mean we still can't ask a question.
Right, but it allows me, so if now I've had the time to review it, now it's a separate action item, and if there's a concern, now I have the ability to vote just on that one specific item. Let's say I didn't agree with this agreement. And now I have the ability to vote no on just that agreement instead of the entire consent.
Yes, and you could always make a motion to request that it be removed out of consent.
And then my motion doesn't get seconded, and then I can't move it.
I don't see why it wouldn't be seconded to move.
It's happened before.
To be clear, in the past, the second was for something different than this specific scenario. I think it is important to know that I agree with you, and I think it is important that we have adequate time to be able to do things. I think Ms. Zimmerman's suggestion of emailing them as they happen gives us that opportunity, but
I'm talking about last-minute items, like this situation.
Ms. Van Hook, I hear you. My point is, if you make a motion, and I recognize that there is frustration when some of these things don't happen, considering the fact that the assumption is all of us have had the same amount of time and have the same information in front of us, and if you second that you would like to move it because you have concerns with it, and there is no other individual on the board who agrees, as frustrating as that is the nature of having 5 individuals here to make that decision, right? So I think it is important to say that during any consent agenda item, if you have not requested previously to move it, you can make that motion, you can do those things. I agree with Board Member Reese in that we have had opportunities to express it. But again, there are still other members here that if we don't agree with you and we wish to move on, that is the nature of a democratic process.
But we, as board members, all have a right to
Sure.
request something to be moved to. So I think the argument is moot point because.
No, I'm just saying, I think it just depends. The only purpose of this particular, and again, we go to this particular scenario because it's just happened. The only purpose was changing ownership. So, I mean, the agreement would still stand. The terms of the agreement, nothing, we didn't have the ability to change anything.
I hadn't even looked at it.
I understand. I understand. But knowing that the only thing we were voting on is because the company we're contracted with, their name changed.
I understand that
So-
after I looked at it, but I hadn't looked at it when I got the email that something had changed. I immediately said, can you please pull this off consent? I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Well, and I think we can continue with that same practice. I don't
Right.
think that we need to have a blanket, if something's added, it automatically goes into action. I think if we look at it.
Last minute is my concern.
And, right, and she's going to email us, so now we'll know ahead of time.
And the email we got was like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I don't remember the exact time that the
But
email came back.
We've
Our
just talked
questions.
about, we just talked about a general practice. If something gets changed, we'll email that something was changed or added.
Vice President Van Hook, I just want to clarify something for transparency. The district has never denied us answering our questions. We do have a deadline, but they're always willing to answer our questions. So I just wanted to be transparent that they're always, even if it's last minute, they're still willing to get back to us. We don't have a deadline that we can't ask anymore, just for the public's knowledge.
No, absolutely. It just that in this specific situation, we got it last minute. I hadn't had time to look at it. So I wanted the ability to be able to review it, knowing it's an agreement, and not knowing what the changes were. I wanted the ability to be able to ask questions during the meeting instead of passing it through consent. And so all I'm asking is we're notified as soon as changes are made, and if it's added at the last minute, that it be moved as a separate action item because we haven't had the ability or the time to be able to review and get our questions answered as part of our Q&A. So that's all. On the shared agreement,
What page are you looking at?
I'm sorry, page 2, and bullet point 7. So this one says, board members and staff will maintain strict confidentiality in all matters discussed in executive session, matters for which confidentiality has been granted by statutes, federal or state regulations, case law, or policy, including but not limited to students' records and discipline of individual students, private personnel information, and privileged information that could cost the district money, support, or public confidence. It's obviously we've had situations that have occurred where information out of executive sessions has leaked, information has been shared on social media based on things that have been said in executive session. And so that's definitely an issue. But at the same time, I want to ensure that we do handle matters in a transparent way before things escalate. Other than obviously, private personnel issues that can't be shared publicly due to, laws. But I think just talking to the community, their biggest thing is transparency and ensuring that we are as transparent as we can be within the laws. And I have
So what is your recommendation on this bullet point?
I just mainly making a statement.
Okay,
And not necessarily a change.
gotcha.
Sorry, just reading through my notes here. Right, that's it for that one. And then for number 8, board members and superintendent will serve as ambassadors for the district, emphasizing the positive aspects of the district. I'm
sorry, where are we?
I just want to make a statement in regards to that, as far as board members and superintendent serving as ambassadors. I think it's crucial to address negative issues that occur within our district, and sometimes those negative issues, unfortunately, overshadow positives. And we must strive to improve our district as people in the community have serious concerns that are not being appropriately addressed. Parents are having to withdraw their students from certain classrooms because their concerns aren't being taken serious. Significant issues impacting the learning environment should not be ignored. I have repeatedly asked and requested that we remove politics and ideologies from our classroom, but given excuses as to why they can't. Also, legal advice should prioritize student safety over political convenience, and that has been extremely lacking with bad legal advice our administration is receiving. It is also challenging when community members express the lack of faith in the district, feeling that students are not prioritized, such as repeated issues with sexually explicit books, books related to race, critical race theory, sexuality, and many other obscene things. Higley is not immune to this garbage, unfortunately. We are seeing it all over the country, but we can change that. Instead of modeling districts like Scottsdale, we should be our own model for other districts. Where we can prioritize the students' well-being and without the interference of politics and ideologies. And I don't know how else
Board Member Van Hook, I'm struggling to understand how this is pertinent to our specific communications. Beyond that,
Because it's
you're making a
being an
political statement
ambassador.
as it's happening. Right now, you are making a political statement as you're talking about this policy. So what I'm asking is, how is this
Okay.
pertinent to something specific in the policy?
Point of order. I am not making it political. I'm asking that we stop, because if we're supposed to be ambassadors for our district, it's hard to sometimes do that when I, as a board member, am coming to the district and saying, this is the concern for my constituents, and their voices and their concerns are not being heard.
Board
And so
Member
I'm
Van Hook.
asking that if we are supposed to make these statements that, oh, all board members have to be ambassadors for the district, then we need to ensure that we are doing what is best for our students.
Board Member Van Hook, again, I hear you, and I appreciate the concern that you have for students in our community, because I think it's something that all of us up here agree with, and that's why we are here. I recognize and understand that sometimes as things happen, when we go through policies, we are limited by these policies, and that is frustration. I guess where I'm failing to understand is what it means by ambassador here is that as a board member, when you go out and you do things, you behave with the understanding that your behavior is reflective back on the board in those moments. Routinely, we have constituents who come to us with concerns and expressions, and being human persons, our perspective on things may not be always what is reality, and getting that information to figure out who, the what, the where, the when, and the process do matter, and we have policies for that. What I am asking then is there a proposed change or suggestion you have? Because while I get that you feel passionately about what it is that you just described, it still is not pertinent to this specific agenda item that we are dealing with.
It absolutely is pertinent because of the statement that's written here. I want to explain that if we are expected to be ambassadors for the district, and, you know, are we going to pretend that everything's always okay? No.
Can you define for
not.
me then what you mean by, and what is it that you take ambassador to mean in that sentence? Because I think where the difficulty is maybe the way I define that and the way you're defining that are two different things in this moment, right? Because at the end of the day, you are still a free citizen who lives in this city who gets to decide how you feel about things. And I think it is important that you can express, yes, I am frustrated with how some of these things get done. Absolutely. I'm struggling to understand how what you're describing and the way the sentence is in terms of ambassador, to me, do not meet the same thing. We are not saying you cannot be critical. And in fact, routinely, every 2 weeks when we have board meetings, we tend to be critical. That's part of our job. That's how we ask questions. That's what we're doing. So I'm struggling to understand how what you described, an ambassador, as it's meant in this policy, if you could explain to me the way you take that to mean, right?
That I feel that by this sentence, it means that I have to be able to promote the district at all times. But at times, it is difficult for me to be able to do that by expressing these concerns.
I think, to be clear, two things can be true at once. I can say Higley is great, and there are things that I am upset with or frustrated or have concerns about. I also think the way we have things—
Which is why I said what I said at the beginning.
Fair, ma'am. What I'm trying to get at is right now, I understand that you have concerns. What I'm failing to understand is how those concerns would change what we are literally writing in there, because nobody is telling you you cannot go and do certain things. As a board member, it is dangerous for you to make comments that directly undercut certain things that the board does, or if we vote, as Ms. Reese has focused on in the past.
Understanding it, that obviously you can't comprehend the fact that by what I'm reading, this is how I feel about that sentence. So it's not really a debatable issue. I'm stating that based on this is how I feel. And so if I'm expected to be an ambassador for the district, which I am.
Yes.
But there are major concerns, which is why I stated that sometimes the negative issues overshadow the good.
Can I ask a question then? And if you're here to express how you feel, which is great, and I'm here for, what is it that you suggest we do? Because then the way I take your statement just now as a point of clarification is you wish to express that you're frustrated with this situation. Great. If that's the case, then we can move on. I understand your frustrations. I think every single person up here has experienced some of these frustrations, and we've only been here for a short period of time. right? Because I've had to make decisions or I've had to do things that ultimately are for the betterment of the district because that is my job in this role. So my question to you then is your choice in making that statement. Do you wish to just make it, or are you expecting us to engage with how we change this protocol going forward? If it is merely an expression of you are frustrated by this circumstance, great, I understand that now and we can move on from it and you can go to your next point. Or are you trying to make a statement to change our protocols? That's what I'm after.
The purpose of my statement is to ensure that we are doing everything possible to ensure that our students are not impacted, their educational environment is not impacted, so that we can continue to be ambassadors and promote our district, and then when we do that, we don't have parents going, no, I'm pulling my kid. No, I don't like the district because of this and this. And then it creates other issues. So I'm literally just making a statement, and I hope that we could look into fixing these issues to provide a better environment for our students and our families that we are here to support.
Agreed. And as an ambassador, we should be doing that. We should be representing the things that need to be fixed. We should be bringing that to our superintendent's attention. So as an ambassador, that is exactly what we should be doing. We should be working to improve what we already have. So it's not to say there's not things that need to be changed, but as an ambassador, we represent it all, and that helps us be with our community and bring issues to the superintendent to be addressed for the better of all of our students, for sure.
And that is all I was trying to say here.
Yes, for sure.
And then for number 12, all communication, news media. So for this policy is specific to all communication with news media. So this is specific to statements on behalf of the district. So I wanted to make sure that we clarify in there.
And it does say providing official statements from the district. And it does reference that policy.
Adding verbiage to say on behalf of the district is what I was looking.
Well, underlined, it says providing official statements from the district.
To me, that reads that the district is giving the statement.
No, that would be if we're indicating we're providing if we're saying Christina Reese Higley School Board member says this, like if it is coming across that I am making a statement on behalf of the district,
Yeah,
is
I
what
just
that
think
is.
like the word, instead of the word from, to change that to statements on behalf of the district.
And that would be fine.
Point of clarification, if a news media outlet contacts me because I'm a board member, would not any response I give to them be on behalf of the district?
No.
The reason I'm asking that, and the reason I say that, is because if one of us gives an interview to a news outlet on a specific agenda item, we run the risk of getting into a very big gray area with respect to open meeting laws. Part of that, especially if it's an item that has not been voted on one way or the other, and you in your statement, or I, or whoever else, give some indication of how they feel about a specific agenda item, it is a gray area, admittedly, because these laws were written a while ago, but we now run the risk of putting ourselves in a potential open meeting situation, especially if multiple of us who are unaware of the other person already answering decide to do that, unless I'm misunderstanding how open meeting law works.
I believe you're misunderstanding, because we as individual board members have the right to speak to the media on how we individually feel about something. We cannot give statements on behalf of the district, but we can speak personally. That is our First Amendment right, not only as individuals, but also as elected officials. So this specifically is related to providing a statement on behalf of the district, which
And
I would never do.
Our board policy addresses this, so.
For sure, but for future, if you make a statement on how you feel on a future a board agenda, we specifically had lawyers twice express this to us. So if you are giving how you feel about a specific agenda item or an item that ends up becoming one, you run the risk of opening yourself up to open meeting violations.
That is true.
Yes, that is true.
And then
But that's
if
also
that-
knowing
if that
what
was
you
the
can
case,
say and
then an open meeting violation could be filed.
against that
with the-
person.
Yes.
Correct.
That is true, that if you are making a statement to the media on something we haven't voted on, and you're indicating things, and that could potentially run into an open meeting violation.
Yep.
And then that would be handled through the AG's office, for sure. And the other intent of this is, if you are providing a statement to media, it is asked that you share that with the board, or with the superintendent, as an informational, so that the district is not caught off guard a statement was made.
Vice President Van Hook and members of the board, are we rewording that or leaving it?
I don't see a problem with changing on behalf of the district.
I would just like to clarify, instead of saying
From the district, on
to
behalf
say
of the district.
On behalf of the district.
Vice President Van Hook and members of the board, can I just point out also that that's verbatim from KDDA policy? The bullet point 12 on the communications mirrors the governing board policy as is.
So we can change it in our protocols because it's not policy. If we, bottom line, we're still bound by policy. So, absolutely. No, thank you for pointing that out. These are our protocols. These are, as board members, what we agree to do. And at some point, then policy KDDA could come back for a request for a revision. But thank you for pointing out that it's the exact, thank you.
So Christine, you have that, right? Okay.
Okay. Have we addressed
I think,
your changes?
I think that's it, yes.
Okay,
All right,
so,
so now, make a motion. I just need one motion for both.
I'll go ahead. So I'll make a motion that we approve the communication protocols with the changes as discussed. Yep.
Yes.
With the changes as discussed, yes.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Who seconded that?
Who seconded that? Amanda.
I just knew it came from down there. All right, so then our communication protocols are agreed upon.
Okay. I motion that the governing board approve the communication protocols as amended. That was to change it.
No, that we approve them as, with the changes provided.
Okay, sorry. I thought we had to make a motion to make the change and then motion to,
No, because we never had a motion to begin with, so our motion included those changes.
got it. Okay.
Yep, we're all good.
That's it. All right, that's all for action items. We're on to 8.1, future agenda items. Anything? And then moving on to 9.1, 2024-25 governing board initiatives. Nope. All right. I motion to adjourn this meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.